Hey friends, it's Lauren with Rustic Honey. Welcome back. Today I thought we would spend a lot of time in the kitchen as we have been, of course, making a lot of food for our family this summer, as well as putting up our garden harvest. So let's get started this morning with a little bit of a breakfast casserole. This recipe was born probably well over a year ago when I found myself kind of out of ingredients for breakfast foods one day, and I came across a box of cornbread mix I happened to have in the pantry, and I thought, let's give this a go. My family loves cornbread. Let's turn this into a little bit of a casserole. And living here on a farm, we always have farm fresh eggs, and we usually have a freezer full of meat, so I'm able to have some sausage ready to go. But one thing I find myself with just having those basic ingredients on hand is I also just get bored at times with our breakfast selections. A breakfast that we typically have here in the summer is an egg sandwich, maybe with our homemade bread, maybe the store-bought bread if you've been watching my channel for a while. It just kind of depends on the day and what my kids are in the mood for. But I get kind of tired of that after a while, and we're not really in the next season of like oatmeals and things that are hearty. So in the summertime, I just want something a little bit different. And to use up a lot of the eggs that we have, I thought, let's put together this casserole again today. It sounds a little bit different than what we've been having, and it'll be a nice treat. You can see here, I just greased a big pie pan with some avocado oil. I mixed up my store-bought cornbread mix, but if you want to make your own cornbread mix, go right for it. I'm also mixing together about 6 to 7 eggs there with a little bit of salt and pepper, hitting it with probably way too much cheese, but no complaints around here. So we're gonna add a little bit of sharp cheddar cheese, and I had a little Monterey Jack left over from another thing I had made over the weekend, so I'm gonna use up the little remnants from that block as well. Now I just add a little bit of paprika on top, mostly just for looks, and I did forget to mention I did put onion powder in this as well because I often like to put sautéed onions and peppers in this recipe too, but I didn't have any ready to go at the moment, and I figured my kids wouldn't care either way if that wasn't in there. So if you want to make this and add a little bit more extra something to it, then I would add onions and peppers. But we're going to stick this in the oven at 350 degrees for about a half an hour, maybe closer to 35 minutes, until the eggs are set and everything comes together so cheesy and yummy. Now that the kids are fed, I am going to be somewhat fast forwarding through our day here because I failed to get the footage of us chopping a bunch of tomatoes up. My mother-in-law was so sweet and came over and helped me this week, and she cut up a ton of tomatoes from our garden while I helped wrangle kids and do things in my shop. So it was kind of crazy around here, and I didn't get the camera footage rolling, and I'm really sad I did not get the footage of these bell peppers because we had the best, most beautiful harvest of bell peppers this year, and I don't know if it was because we had such good rains, but these are definitely the best bell peppers I have ever raised in our garden. And I said I should say we. My husband is definitely more of a gardener than I am, and I asked him, I asked if he bought a different type of pepper plant because they were just so much better than anything we've ever raised. And he said no, he thought it was because of the rains too. So I was surprised he did not have a picture on his phone though of our big wagon full of peppers, and I'm sad to say that I failed to get a picture of it too. So hopefully next year, maybe we'll get lucky and have another beautiful harvest like this. I'm just so sad that we didn't get a picture of it. As you saw there, since I had so many, I went ahead and chopped them all up, and I'm putting them in the freezer so that when I get my next round of tomatoes, I'll be ready to go for homemade salsa, or I'll have fajita peppers ready and on the go. Now, I had mentioned to a friend the other day that our cucumber plant just dried up in the sun. We kind of let it go after our huge abundance you saw earlier in the prior videos to this. So a friend of mine had extra cucumbers, and she was sweet enough to bring me those, plus some of those little cherry tomatoes, and I was really excited to have another fresh thing to put together for our meals this week. So I am chopping up the cucumbers that she gave me with some onions, and I'm going to make another batch of that cucumbers and onion salad I shared with you all not too long ago. So I'll be sure to link to that video again too, and the recipe. But I'm also going to mix up another variety today that I want to have ready for dinner tonight, because the cucumber and onion vinegar one takes a few days, in my opinion, to taste a little bit more like a pickle. This one will be more ready to go for tonight's dinner. So I happen to have about half a cup of sour cream left in the refrigerator. And to it, I'm adding red wine vinegar, a little bit of dill weed, and a few other seasonings. I'll leave this in the description box below too, the link to the recipe. If you have fresh dill weed lying around, I definitely think that would probably be the best thing to add, but dried dill weed adds just the right amount of flavor too. So I'm going to throw this together with the onions, and on this recipe it would probably be best to have a little bit more of a mild onion. Maybe a red onion would be really pretty in this one if you wanted to take that to a backyard barbecue this summer. But such a fun little refreshing summer treat. Like growing up, I never was excited about cucumbers whatsoever. I've always been a pickle lover, but for some reason never really liked cucumbers that much until my adulthood. Maybe it's because I basically pickle them now every time I eat them, and that's why I like them. But for some reason, they really taste like summer to me. It's one of those things that it's so good fresh from the garden, and it just makes a summertime dinner just that much more special and feel like you're just eating all of these things that you raised in your garden. So I'm going to stick these in the fridge for tonight and be able to pull them out with our dinner. I also set aside just a few sliced cucumbers and cherry tomatoes for snacking, which my kids have enjoyed this week, but they also requested their popcorn treat. And so even though I was really busy in the kitchen, I decided I would make them this because all three of them were really excited to have it. So I'm basically just making a batch of popcorn, really simple, in the whirly pop with just a little bit of oil. And once it's popped, I'm going to let it cool. And then I'm going to try to transfer it and remove any unpopped kernels. And then in another bowl, I'm taking white chocolate, or what I have here is the white almond bark, and I'm melting it down, and then I'm going to put it over the popcorn. Then we're just going to give it a good toss. And I think by far the hardest part of this recipe is to let it set for a while. I think that is the magic in it. So once you get it tossed and coated, it's just a light coating. It's nothing too thick or too rich, but it just has just the right hint of salty and sweet together. I didn't mention I do salt my popcorn. I don't do anything else to it, but I do salt it before I add this. You can also do this with a microwave butter popcorn, and it's really good too. I like to do that during the holidays just to be really simple. And then while it's still kind of setting up, I add the sprinkles because life is just better with sprinkles. If you ask Reese, sprinkles are basically a food group. So, all right, headed back to check on our roaster full of tomatoes. Again, my mother-in-law came and helped me cut up all of these tomatoes. And this was an idea I got from her that she started doing last year, was just to put all of the tomatoes in a big roaster to cook them down throughout the day. It's a lot more hands-off than doing them in the oven, which is what I would typically do for my sauces. So this was a lifesaver, especially with kids running around all day long and trying to keep them fed and all the other commitments that we have going on. So here I am just seasoning up the rest of what I have. I'm going to do my best to leave you somewhat of a description down below for my recipe. I will say I was pretty much just winging it on today's sauce based on what I did last year, but I really like to just cook it down and then give it a taste test before I get it canned. I don't follow anyone's particular recipe. I just have kind of concocted my own throughout the last few years, and I've really enjoyed having homemade pasta sauce on hand. Now, if you're new to canning, I went ahead and told you guys about the Ball Blue Book last time we talked. I feel like it's kind of the Bible for canning. So when you are trying to make your own recipe or just get started, it's nice to follow along with what they have. That way you know you're doing everything safely, because there are a lot of rules when it comes to preserving your food, and you want to make sure you're doing it safely for the health of your family. One of the greatest things about canning our own food from our garden is that we are preserving our harvest, and we're preserving something that's extra nutritious for our family because we grew it ourselves. We know all of the ingredients in it. But of course, we want to do that in a safe manner so that whenever we go to eat it 6 months or a year from now, we're not, putting ourselves in harm's way if we didn't do things correctly. So that has always been really hard for me. I find it almost hard to get started because it's an intimidating process for me. The science behind canning sometimes feels a little bit intimidating overall, but that book helps break it down. And again, having someone to ask, like my mother-in-law who's been doing this for years, to see what she would do. And of course, we talked about this last time, but there are a lot of good resources online these days that there probably wasn't back when I first started canning. So just get started. Even if you only choose one thing to do this summer, I encourage you to try it out. And I think sometimes the hardest part for me is doing the first batch of anything for the summer. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below if you're a seasoned canner. It seems like when that first batch of tons of tomatoes comes in, I'm a little bit overwhelmed. And so it can be hard to just start the process. But once I have my system down on how I'm going to wash everything, chop everything, and cook it all down, then everything seems to go a lot smoother. And I have a different confidence to where I feel like, well, sure, tonight is a great night. I will just get these canned before dinner or during dinner. And there's just a confidence that comes with that over time, I think. And that can be true of anything we're learning in the kitchen, whether it's canning or learning to bake bread or make homemade mayo, whatever it is you're working on. Maybe you're learning to cook for the first time. That confidence will come, and then it'll make everything seem a lot easier as you go. You'll have your systems in place. Here we are at dinner time. I'm going to let those run in the canner while we sit and have ourselves a little summer dinner here. A lot of fresh things from our garden, along with meat that we raised ourselves. Actually, the brats are from venison that my husband had hunted over the last winter, and he processed those too. So it's really rewarding to sit down at the table and see a plate full of food that we have raised or hunted or gathered on our farm. So that is one super rewarding thing about living in the country. That's one thing I love about the summer kitchen. It's that things are really simple and fresh, and it seems like it's easy to get a dinner to come together in no time because you have a lot of ingredients just at your fingertips. And so it's important, though, with such an abundance in this moment in time, that we put in that little extra work to make sure that we can enjoy a plate full of homemade things throughout those winter months as well. So as you can see, the next morning I am making some coffee, and I grabbed the large bucket of jalapenos from our back porch. I didn't quite have the energy to get those tackled along with the tomatoes yesterday, but I wanted to make sure to get them canned and preserved so that we didn't miss out on this harvest. I feel like we always get a really good harvest of jalapenos every year. It doesn't seem to matter what the weather is like. They just grow really well in our garden. So by the end of summer, I'm usually giving them away or freezing the extras, but we already have a ton going. And like I said before, I don't have a ton of extra tomatoes at this very moment in time. So what I'm going to do is can a bunch of these just like pickled jalapenos today so that we have those ready to go. I like to use those in different recipes or in nachos. And my oldest son is obsessed with jalapenos. He wants to put them on basically on top of anything. The hotter, the better. He loves the heat. So I am just going to make the pickled variety today, and I'm going to freeze any extras that don't fit in my jars so that they will be ready to go for salsa when the tomatoes are ready. Now, as you can see, I put a glove or a homemade glove on my hand. I never think to buy those gloves at the store, but they would be so handy to have a box around for when jalapeno cutting comes into play. Now, some of you might be laughing, and some of you not so much. It just depends. But one year I did not wear gloves whatsoever when I was processing my jalapenos, and they must have been super hot, taking the seeds out and things, because my fingers all felt burnt like the day after or that night. So I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but comment down below and let me know. I just kind of don't chance it too much anymore. But since I wasn't really taking the seeds out of these, I felt like it was kind of awkward having that thing on my hand. So I ended up handling these without the gloves for this part. But I just washed my hands really well right afterwards because, of course, I'm also handling a newborn at the moment, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't get any spicy oils on her skin either. That is just one thing that I've always remembered about processing jalapenos. You learn that lesson once and you don't forget it. The recipe I'm following today, I will put a link to in the description box below, but it's really simple. We are just going to wash up the jalapenos. As you saw, I did that in the sink, and I actually added a little vinegar to my water as well, just to kill any bacteria, which, as I say that out loud, seems really silly because we're basically going to pickle this in straight up vinegar anyway. So we're killing bacteria either way, but I don't know why when it comes to canning, I'm just always, better safe than sorry. So I follow through with that process. Now, jalapenos are one of the easier things to can because you can do what's called a raw pack. So that's basically you're just putting the raw vegetable inside of this can, or inside of this jar, and then we're going to fill it with a hot liquid. So we get our jars really hot. And one trick I learned was to put the jars in that top rack like that and just sit them above the water so they're constantly in the steamy hot water. You want to keep your jars hot so that when you go to put them down into the boiling water canner, nothing breaks on you. So if everything's already hot, it's ready to seal. You're not going to have anything break as you go. I love the look of these red and green jalapenos together. I think if these turn out well, I could also use these for Christmas gifts for people in baskets around the holidays. Pickling liquid, it's really simple. We're just going to bring to a boil 5 cups of vinegar with 5 cups of water and about half a cup of canning salt. I'm going to pack those jalapenos in these jars as tightly as I can because it seems like no matter how many you can stuff in there and get them really packed in, it'll still take up a lot of room with just that liquid. So we're going to put the liquid and then on top, we're going to ladle it in until we have about half an inch at the top. And that's when we put our hot lids on, adjust the rings, and get these down in the boiling water canner so that I can get my kids some dinner on the table too. Now, I think when it comes to canning, one of the things I've had to learn over time is to how to make canning fit in with my life, because most of us don't have all like day to just think about canning and all the things we want to preserve. Maybe we do. Maybe we have a Saturday every once in a while. But sometimes for me, it comes down to let's chop the peppers now. They may have to live in my refrigerator for a few hours. And then this evening while I'm making dinner, I can get everything going so that I can be in the kitchen for a while and actually can this harvest. So I didn't grow up around canning, and so the rhythm of how it works to me is just something new that I'm trying to figure out for myself at this stage in life. But I think if you are really wanting to start canning, even if you work outside the home, I feel like there are ways that you can make time for it. Just like anything, if it's going to be your hobby and you want to make time for it, where there's a will, there's a way. That's just kind of, I like to have that mindset about anything that I'm interested in. And I think that canning our food is a worthy pursuit, because if you want to be putting more wholesome food on the table for your family or be more in control of the ingredients that you're feeding your family, then I think canning is a great place to start. I feel like my generation has a new interest in this, and especially now with the rising cost of groceries, but also the awareness we now have around all of the processed food in the grocery store. So I think the more that we feel like we have control over what's on our dinner table, the more we have control over our health. And yes, it is going to be hard work, but like anything else, if we give it a process and we get familiar with it, we're going to build our confidence over time, and it's going to seem a lot easier. Just like baking that bread, we can our summer harvest and have really nutritious food for our family all winter long. I'm so excited to have 10 jars of spaghetti sauce ready to go for this winter. We will so enjoy them. Thank you so much for joining me today. I loved cooking with you. Let me know in the comments below if you are canning this summer and what you look forward to having in the pantry most over the winter. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to my channel so we can hang out again soon. Thanks for stopping by.